Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. And tonight we're going to be talking about, of course, the recent updates coming from the Lebanon front and the front in Gaza, alongside the prospects that we were speaking about when it comes to a ceasefire and where that's going. Latest important developments from the ground, and we're going to be talking about the important and dangerous statements coming from the Iranian supreme leader, Sayyid Ayatullah Ali Khamenei, and senior figures in the IRGC when it comes to the response of Iran to Israeli aggression against Iran that happened just over a week ago, because we had certain statements coming from the beginning, but it seems like the more time passes, the more elaboration we have, and it appears to be that we are getting closer to a response coming from Iran. I'm going to start off with the updates from the ground. Firstly, when it comes to Gaza, the North is struggling still very much. But again, when it comes to the Palestinian resistance, it doesn't appear to be affecting the actions of the Palestinian resistance. Today, we had more footage being released from the armed wing of the PIJ alongside Al-Qassam brigades about fighting in Jabalia, in North Gaza, the areas that Israel is trying to ethnically cleanse. And they're punishing the civilians very heavily when it comes to that. This is coming simultaneously with outrage in Israel from many people in Israel about the leaks that are happening from Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Apparently, a senior figure leaked a report coming from the office of Netanyahu to the German newspaper Bild about statements again. And when we talk about leaks and documents from Benjamin Netanyahu's office, I needed to clarify that before I get into the details. Benjamin Netanyahu receives reports regularly from the security establishment in Israel. However, he manipulates the reports that he gets. And we had a clarification from senior figures in the security establishment when it comes to Israel about that from the beginning of the war, especially when we were talking about the threats of invading Rafah and the fact that Netanyahu's claims about dismantling the brigades of the armed wing of Hamas and how they give him, or the security establishment, parts of it, give reports to Benjamin Netanyahu, and then Benjamin Netanyahu twists things to suit his narrative. For example, when we talk about a brigade, when it comes to the Palestinian resistance, they will tell him that we killed 120. And if there is an assumption in the Israeli security establishment that each brigade will have 800 or 900, that means, minus the number that they spoke about. But according to Netanyahu, how he views that is, oh, well, we dismantled the whole brigade. And likewise, the same thing applies when it comes to reports, especially when it comes to Sinwar. Now, this leak was about Sinwar and apparently how he is using the public pressure coming from Israel against Benjamin Netanyahu. And all of it was due to serve Benjamin Netanyahu and his approach. Because we had many people in Benjamin Netanyahu's government talking about how the opposition in Israel, or the people who are calling to end the war, are in fact serving Hamas and serving Sinwar to a level where they started calling them members of Hamas. That led more Israelis to go out to the streets and more people to criticize Benjamin Netanyahu and his war, his genocide in Gaza. And we're having more brave tones coming from certain figures in Israel now. Although Benjamin Netanyahu had resistance to the way he's conducting the war ever since the beginning, whether when it comes to the way he's conducting it, certain details with it, we also had a portion of the Israeli public resisting the war for the concept of resisting the genocide and to call for human rights for the Palestinian people. And these people are increasing their tone now. And we spoke about the publisher of Haaretz a few days ago in his conference in London, where he mentioned the Palestinian resistance, and he spoke about the resistance freedom fighters in the West Bank and in Gaza, in occupied territory. So now this is becoming more of a mainstream for people to go and have these statements and for people to actually oppose the genocide that is happening. And again, all of that is due to the longevity and how long Benjamin Netanyahu stretched this war. When it comes to Lebanon, Hezbollah today declared, of course, alongside their usual targetings of occupied territories, that they targeted Galilot again. Galilot is the hub of the Israeli intelligence community, especially the Mossad 8200 and the Military Intelligence Directorate basis. That shows you that Israel hasn't really been able to take down the threat coming from Hezbollah when it comes to their capabilities and their targeting. So if you had a certain location being targeted, not once, not twice, but 5, 6, or 7 times being targeted again, you're talking about a great failure coming from the Israeli side, and the fact that they are unable to deal with the fact that Hezbollah are still targeting them. So no answer again, although we had a statement from Yoav Gallant, the Israeli war minister, a few days ago, that they took down 70% of Hezbollah's drone capabilities, and of course certain percentages of their missiles, which is again unsubstantiated and is only there to have some sort of legitimacy when it comes to Israel's campaign in Lebanon and in Gaza. Now, we had talks about a ceasefire. The talks about the ceasefire, they revolved around both Lebanon and Gaza. So we had Amos Hochstein visiting Lebanon, but we also had the mediators going to Cairo and the mediators going to Qatar as well. And the surprising thing is that, well, the mediators, especially when it comes to Qatar and Egypt, they are, proposing to Hamas what Israel is bringing on the table, which is getting an outright rejection from Hamas and the Palestinian resistance. Because Hamas, they're talking on behalf of the Palestinian resistance. And when it comes to agreeing on certain things, when it comes to the negotiations, it doesn't revolve just around them. It revolves around all of the other Palestinian resistance movements that represent of course, fighters against Israel. And of course, they're looking at the benefits for the Palestinian community. And again, we're hearing more statements coming from senior figures in Hamas that all that we have been offered is a limited ceasefire, only to release some of the Israelis who are kidnapped, and nothing in return. We're not talking about a total ceasefire. We're talking about something temporary. And they haven't even spoken about, withdrawal, nothing from what we're demanding. And we still have the same lines. And one of their senior figures, Mahmoud al-Mirdawi, said the other day that if anyone thinks that by assassinating Yahya Sinwar, we will all of a sudden accept something different, or that will reduce our level of demands from Israel, they're delusional. So clearly, it's not working there. And the surprising thing is the fact that the mediators who are supposed to push for the ceasefire, especially when we talk about Egypt and Qatar, they're not really doing anything to have some sort of a breakthrough, even when it comes to their position with the United States administration. And the unfortunate thing is that the United States administration has been clearly all of this time buying time for Netanyahu to continue his genocide in Gaza. And now it's becoming more and more blatant that, well, even when it comes to Qatar and Egypt, it's not really working that well. And the worrying thing is, we're having more reports about complicity from the Egyptian government when it comes to Israel. Firstly, the report about a ship carrying a German flag going to the Alexandria port that carries a weapons shipment to Israel. And then we saw an Israeli corvette going through Suez Canal, going to Israel, Sa'ar 6. Okay, well, what is that about exactly? You're talking about a country committing genocide, and we all get the fact that, there's international laws and what have you, but you're not talking about a country that respects anything when it comes to international law, and it's been blatant that they are committing this genocide against innocent civilians. And the more worrying thing is that we had a clarification coming from Egypt, like the authority of the Suez Canal is saying, we let every ship pass through the Suez Canal in accordance to our international agreements. And these can be military ships and they can be civilian ships too, as if it's like an excuse. And again, that's a very worrying development. Now, there has been suspicion, of course, for a very long time that, this wouldn't have gone for that long unless we had a level of complicity coming from the Egyptian authorities. But now the fact that you have something so blatant with a confirmation coming from the relevant authorities or bodies in Egypt is extremely dangerous, and is something that could also increase tensions when it comes to Egypt internally. We already have certain movements coming from certain organizations that deal with the matter, especially when it comes to the legalities of it, because you cannot establish something based on international law and simultaneously contradict or go against something else when it comes to international law. And by the way, we're just only speaking from an international law perspective here. We're not going to get into the right thing or the wrong thing to do when it comes to certain countries. Now, this leads us to the main subject that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the Iranian response. Iran had several statements after the Israeli aggression against Iran. Firstly, the Israeli aggression wasn't a massive success. They clearly had certain things, projectiles or missiles landing on certain bases in Iran. However, they were carried out from outside of Iranian airspace. The argument is the Iranian air defense systems were more capable than what the Israelis or the American administration anticipated them to be. And they carried out the majority of the strikes from Iraqi airspace, especially or in particular, airspace that is used by the American forces in Iraq. Now, from the beginning, we heard a certain tone coming from Iran, which was quite natural when it comes to absorbing the hit, understanding what exactly happened, to establish what type of response we would anticipate and when that would come. So we had that absorption phase initially. However, then it came to the statements about the response of Iran. And in the initial phase, we had statements coming from Iran like, we reserve our right to respond in the right time and in the right manner. Then we had a statement coming out from the Iranian supreme leader saying that the authorities or the officials in Iran will do what's best for the Iranian population and for the Islamic Republic of Iran. Again, hinting that he's giving them a level of independence when it comes to that, but there was nothing very severe or very clear. However, now we have more sharp responses coming from Iran, And again, these responses and these statements are not to be taken lightly. Why? Because now Iran established itself as a country that says things and does them. So it's not only talk, we're talking about action, and it's not only action from movements aligned with Iran or supported by Iran, although they have their independence. You're talking about Iran as a state directly. So we had a couple of reports today. One of them was this report in Tasnim, which is a semi-official Iranian news agency, Tasnim news agency, about the latest speech of Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. And he said some interesting things in this speech, especially when it comes to the response of Iran. So, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatullah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, reminded the enemies, including the US and the Zionist regime, that they will definitely receive a crushing reaction to what they are doing against Iran and the resistance front. Now, notice the terminology that is being used here, alongside the fact that this response isn't only coming for the aggression against Iran, but also the resistance fronts. When they had their attack on Israel on the 1st of October, they said this is for Ismail Haniyeh, for Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and for the children of Gaza. So it's not just because of the aggression against Iran, and that has been very evident from the actions of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They added, Ayatollah Khamenei made the remark at a meeting with a group of students of all ages, including university students from across Iran, at the Imam Khomeini Husseiniya of Tehran on Saturday, November the 2nd. In the meeting, Ayatollah Khamenei elucidated the fundamental grounds for the Iranian nation's battle against the oppression and excessive demands of the United States, spanning over 70 years. Again, that's something very interesting as well in the speech, the fact that Ayatollah Khamenei is including previous periods when it comes to Iran, from the days of Mossadegh, who had the important operation at the time from the CIA, which was called the Ajax operation. If you haven't heard about it, I'd recommend you go and read up about it, when they took down a democratically elected government in Iran, and a coup, really, again supported by Western intelligence agencies, against a man who wasn't necessarily like a religious figure. He had certain alliances, but that's for those who, some people will say it's only against certain governments with a certain shape or ideology. No, it's about certain people who strive for independence from the global hegemony of the empire, and who prioritize the interests of their own country and the interests of their own people before the interests of foreign greedy corporations who constantly try and impose their will, including through acts of terror and violence. That is very important when it comes to his speech. The leader emphasized that the Islamic national, rational, wise, and humane resistance displayed by the Iranian nation against US arrogance, in line with international laws, will continue with the correct roadmap and without negligence or delay. So there's something imminent here. On this victorious path, any hostile actions taken against the Iranian nation by the Zionist regime and the United States will be met with a crushing response. This is also important. The leader pointed out the continuous and unwavering efforts of the Iranian nation and officials in confronting global arrogance. The general movement of the nation and officials against global arrogance and the criminal system governing the current world order is a logical one, in line with religion, ethics, Islamic and international laws, he stated, Khamenei.ir reported. The leader described the Iranian nation's fight against global arrogance as a permanent endeavor, designating a day as the national day of fighting against global arrogance is, in fact, to ensure that this historic battle will not be forgotten. This is especially significant given the attempts by certain people to sow doubt in the nation's courageous and conscious efforts to stand up and fight against the US and its proxies in the region, and subsequently to deny this opposition. He highlighted addressing efforts by certain individuals to question the authenticity of the seizure of US Embassy in Tehran, known as the spy den. The leader affirmed that the US Embassy in Tehran, as evidenced by the seized documents, functioned as a command center for instigating counter-revolutionaries, remnants of the Shah's Savak, sowing discord, inciting ethnic conflicts, plotting a coup, threatening the life of Imam Khomeini, and undermining the revolution. This reality remains unchanged, even if some of those involved in the incident have developed doubts, he said. And of course, we have more confirmation coming just recently from the attempts of the US ambassador in Lebanon meeting with opposition in Lebanon and talking about the need for them to go and start taking actions against Hezbollah. Again, in a confirmation of an Israeli failure in Lebanon and the nature of the malicious role that US embassies play across the world. The leader further pointed out the revelatory nature of the documents discovered by the US spy den, urging the youth to carefully examine them. He described the seizure of the US spy den as a turning point, a historic and unforgettable event due to the revelation and the nature of the American embassy. It was for this reason that Imam Khomeini, with his all-pervading insight, approved of the students' action. He also criticized individuals who seek to portray the actions of the Iranian people against imperialism as irrational, adding, "We do not accuse these individuals of treachery. However, when they misrepresent this just, rational movement, which aligns with international logic, as illogical, they demonstrate, at the very least, that they are short-sighted and lacking in foresight." He asserted that the Iranian people's cherished status in the global public opinion, despite the extensive efforts of the hegemonic system's media system, is a testament to the effectiveness of the Islamic Republic's successful and rational resistance. The fact that people in various countries took the streets in celebration after Operation True Promise indicates that the Iranian nation's movement is not only in accordance with international logic, but with Islamic and Quranic logic. In the continuation of his remarks, Ayatullah Khamenei underscored that the actions of the enemy will not go unanswered by those who are working to fight them on behalf of the Iranian nation, and that such actions will not be forgotten. He asserted that both the Zionist regime and the United States will undoubtedly receive a crushing response for their actions against the Iranian nation and the resistance front. This is also very important because, like I said, Iran established its responses on Israel on international law, and when they talk about that, they always used to speak about the attack on Iranian sovereignty. However, adding the resistance fronts adds another depth or another layer to that response. And again, it's coming in accordance to previous statements that we heard from Iran, and again with international law, because don't forget, when it comes to UN resolutions and international law, all of the countries across the world have a right to have a preemptive strike against a reckless entity that is proving to be conducting acts of mass terror and war crimes and has an expansionist nature and proven by the international court to be conducting a genocide. And therefore, Iran is also elaborating when it comes to their attack and how they will also attack. Referring to certain misguided historians who attribute the beginning of Iran's opposition with America to the seizure of the US spy den, the leader stated that is a lie. The opposition has existed since at least August 19, 1953, because it was the date that the Americans betrayed the trust of Prime Minister Mossadegh's national and popular government, overthrowing it in a bloody coup before reinstating the oppressive Pahlavi regime. And this is what we spoke about previously, Operation Ajax, taking down a democratically elected leader in Iran way before the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And they ended up with Ayatollah Khamenei emphasized that the establishment of Savak and its training of interrogators in brutal interrogation techniques, along with the presence of tens of thousands of American advisors involved in military and government interference, infiltration, and espionage as other anti-Iranian measures that were undertaken by the US. He highlighted that these actions were designated to humiliate the Iranian nation and assert dominance over Iran. So we are having more serious, outright, clear statements coming from the Iranian leader when it comes to the response. And this is not just coming from the supreme leader himself, this is also coming from the IRGC. We also had this article as well when it comes to the response of Iran, and more statements coming from the IRGC about the type of response we are anticipated to see when it comes to Israel. So we had this report here. The commander of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps warned the Zionist regime that it will receive such a great response for its active aggression against Iran that it cannot conceive. Such a great response that it cannot conceive. Addressing a cultural event in Iran's southern province of Fars on Thursday, Major General Hossein Salami pointed to the Zionist regime's attack on Iran on October 26, saying that the Israelis are mistaken to think that they can change the history by launching a number of missiles. He then reminded the Israeli regime of the retaliatory True Promise 2 operation that Iran carried out on October 1st, saying the Zionists have not forgotten how the Iranian missiles streaked across the sky while the Israeli air defense missile systems failed to counteract. The IRGC commander then warned Israel that it will be given an unimaginable response for its act of aggression against Iran. And before we continue, by the way, the reason that we're mentioning this here, again, is to highlight the difference from the early days when it comes to a week ago, what Iran was saying when it comes to the response, and how fierce the responses are. And I will tell you why I think that is the case at the moment. On October 1st, Iran responded to the Israel assassination of Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah Secretary General Said Hassan Nasrallah, and IRGC General Abbas Nil Furushan by launching as many as 200 ballistic missiles toward the Zionist regime's military and intelligence bases all over the occupied Palestinian territories. In the early hours of October 26th, the Zionist regime attacked a number of military sites in Iran, which resulted in the martyrdom of 4 servicemen and a civilian. In remarks on October 27, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatullah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, emphasized the necessity of disrupting the flawed calculations of the Zionist regime regarding Iran. They're making a miscalculation with respect to Iran. Our officials should be the ones to assess and precisely apprehend what needs to be done and do whatever is in the best interest of this country and nation. They must be made, or the enemy, made to realize who the Iranian people are and what the Iranian youth are like, the leader added. And this final statement is the best example of the difference when it comes to the tone, leaving it to the officials in the best interest of the Iranian people and the Iranian youth. And then we, of course, reached this stage now. This stage of, firstly, the IRGC, the unimaginable response. Sayyid Ayatullah Ali Khamenei is saying it's a crushing response. Okay, what changed in the past week, and why is Iran having such harsh statements now? And why did they not have these harsh statements before? What has changed, and what are we anticipating to see in the next few days or in the very short coming period? Well, firstly, and that's purely an assessment and an observation from myself, Iran could have easily had a certain limited amount of time where they, of course, absorbed the attack that came from Israel and then tried to a certain extent, use the fact that they haven't responded yet as leverage to try and get things in order. Immediately after Israel had the attack on Iran, we heard about and spoke about intensive prospects of a ceasefire, both in Lebanon, both in Gaza. The American mediators were there, the Israeli mediators were there, the delegations were in Doha, were in Qatar, Hochstein was in Lebanon. We had intensive talks about a ceasefire. This could have been a certain attempt or a certain theater from the United States administration to show Iran that we are indeed looking towards a ceasefire, so don't respond, thinking that the Iranian officials will do the same thing that they've done in July, which was, well, Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran. It was clearly Israel. He was assassinated one day after the president came in and after the president saw him in Iran. Massive act of terror. And the United States came to Iran and they told them, listen, Iran, I know, they killed Ismail Haniyeh, and of course, put aside the fact that he's the main negotiator, he already accepted the ceasefire, and the fact that Israel is killing everyone who is potentially trying to reach a ceasefire. But they told the Iranians, we're just a few weeks away from a ceasefire. Please do not respond to Israel. The Iranians, not necessarily out of faith and trust in the United States administration, told them, fine, no problem. You want to negotiate? Go ahead and negotiate, and tell us what's about to happen. Okay, we'll put it on hold in the meantime. I'm not sure if they clarified or not, but that's probably the case because they haven't responded up until October the 1st. So there was over 2 months there. All right. Then the Iranian president said, well, the Americans told us in July, don't respond because a ceasefire was 1 week away. A ceasefire agreement was 1 week away. Again, the Iranians have a very long history with the United States. They did not do that out of trust or faith in the United States administration, but as a very clever act to show the whole world and elaborate further what everything is about. We have a lot of propaganda. Many people are still to this day being misled. And the more time goes by, the clearer the image is for everyone globally when it comes to Iran. Now we reach this stage. So we have blatant Israeli aggression against Iran, because don't forget, in July they did not confirm that they attacked or they were the ones who assassinated Haniyeh, but Iran still responded. Now we have an aggression from Israel. We have a confirmation from Israel, and we also have a confirmation that this is not necessarily the last one. Again, everything is arguable when it comes to the last one because of the levels of success, the air defense systems of Iran, their effectiveness, the fact that we didn't have a successful campaign, most of the missiles were intercepted, and the fact that they did not dare come near the Iranian airspace in fear of losing their fighter jets. They only fly over civilian areas, civilian buildings, hospitals, and innocent women and children, and bomb them indiscriminately. But against someone who has power, that doesn't work. And what does that prove to you again? That they understand the language of force. They do not understand the language of peace, and they do not understand the language of diplomacy, because nothing changes unless they are met with force. They have a history of only understanding with force, which is very typical to any colonial entity, a colonial entity planting itself through terror and imposing its will on the indigenous people. They only understood through force because that's the language that they were inflicting on a mass scale against the population. And the use of force is incomparable, by the way, between the aggressors and the people defending themselves. In this case, in all historical cases of colonialism in the region and globally as well. So what are we looking to see? Well, based on the statements that we are hearing from Iran, based on the speed at which the tone changed from the Iranian leadership, and in particular from the supreme leader and the IRGC, we are indeed looking towards a very big and sharp response coming from Iran against Israel. Is that attack going to be all out and never ending attack? No, not necessarily, but it's going to be an attack that is bigger than the previous attacks, because the pattern of Iranian behavior when it comes to Israel operated in this manner. We had the attack in April, we had the attack in True Promise 2, more intense. What we're expected to see is even more intense than those previous two attacks, and we could be seeing other bases being targeted. There isn't a lot of likelihood that Iran would necessarily start to target Israel's infrastructure, for example, when it comes to their next attack. But again, it wouldn't be surprising if they would. They would definitely be targeting things, in my opinion, to do with the military of the genocide state. But we were surprised by certain actions from Iran before, and there is no reason to say why we wouldn't be surprised again by the level of Iranian response. And these were the main things that I want to talk to you about in this live stream. And let me open the space up for you. And thank you again, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Let's have a look at your live chat. And before I begin, just a quick thanks to Sean Hurl and Sailor Jerry Swallow and Ryan78 and Stephen Burrows and Jonathan Ray and Alan Marwin, Golden Sun, and Shiva Mohan. Thank you very much for your participation. And by the way, apologies that during the initial phase of the live stream, I don't put some of the comments or supers, just because I am engaged in the introduction and presentation. But now I'll do my best to try and share as much as possible. And if you wouldn't mind, if you have anything for me, just to highlight it, because we have a fair bit of contribution from the beginning. And again, welcome everyone to another live stream. Let's have a look. Paul Ambrose, sorry about that. Paul, you're asking me, did I see the US takeover of the Lebanese airport? No, I haven't actually seen that. And I'm not seeing anything now. If you have a source, maybe then we can have a look, but I haven't seen anything to do with a takeover of the airport by the United States. So if you have a source, if you wouldn't mind sending it in the live, and we will have a look. Gullyberg Mahmoud is the claim that Iran will close its airspace from November 4th up until November the 6th. Again, that's not something that I've actually had a confirmation about. The only closure of the airspace that we heard about was several days, or 1 day, excuse me, after the Israeli attack on Iran from Iraq. I'm seeing now, I mean, there's a report on an Israeli website, Israel National News, it's called, saying that reports are saying Iran to close its airspace from 2:30 a.m. on November 4th until 6:30 p.m. on November 6th. Reports, they're saying reports, and they're not elaborating where those reports are necessarily coming from. Therefore, that's not something that I would be able to say that, you know, we have a confirmation about that coming from Iran, unless something clear is coming. But again, if you think that, you know, they might do that as a response or a potential response, then it's very likely to happen in any given moment. It can happen tomorrow, it can happen the next few days, because like I said, from previous attacks that we had on Israel, well, Iran did more than we expected from them. Let's have a look. Let's go to your next one. And also Arash, and I hope I mentioned Shiva, Mohan, and Golden Sun. Thank you so much for your supers, much appreciated. Let's see if we have any more questions. TMZBGD, what do you know about the Russians being in Israel? If you mean the Russian authorities, then we have constant diplomatic activity when it comes to Russia and Israel. Now, their relations have deteriorated. In the past decade, we had periods where Netanyahu, even before, further away than the past decade, the past 15 to 20 years even, we had certain periods where there was an exceptionally good relationship between Russia and Israel. Firstly, there's 1.2 million ex-Soviet Union nationals in Israel that went to Israel as part of a deal between the Soviet Union and Israel. There were reports that Israel handed them, sensitive information from their biggest supporter, the United States, in return for Russia sending Jews to Israel. And again, how Jewish are they? We don't know really. Of course, to change the demographics further in favor of the Jewish majority. But we had good relations between Putin and Netanyahu and certain previous figures in Netanyahu's government. One of them was Avigdor Lieberman, who was originally Belarusian. And they had a lot of coordination. But in recent years, they deteriorated. And Russia sent threatening messages to Israel recently, especially after the attack that Israel had next to a very important base that belongs to Russia in Syria. And they sent a warning to everyone with Russian origins in Israel to leave Israel so long as it's possible to leave Israel. And they don't usually do that unless there is something significant coming, and also as a warning to the state hosting the people. We also had recent reports that that Putin sent a message to Netanyahu telling him, reach a ceasefire very soon. You need to reach a ceasefire very soon. And, I wouldn't be surprised if it had an underlying threat as well from the Russian president to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I hope that clarifies. Turkish truth hurts. Salam Mahmoud, have you heard about the Iranian attack coming from Iraq? If so, why? How not from Iran? Also, any ideas of the number of casualties and losses on IDF troops? Well, firstly, that was a report. That's nothing confirmed. There were reports that because Israel conducted its attack from Iraqi airspace that is used to regularly by the US forces, then Iran will conduct an attack from Iraq on Israel. There is no confirmation that that's going to happen. There is no confirmation that that's the case. And if you ask me personally, I think it's very unlikely, because I think Iran, for it to conduct a strategic, surprising attack that will have a very high success rate, it's going to have to be conducted from an area with zero foreign presence. And that area is Iran. Iran is very secure. The strategic missiles are there, the supersonics, the hypersonics, and they would be able to carry out that attack with more convenience and confidence. I highly doubt that they would be conducting something major from Iraq, unless it's something to do with levels of drones maybe, or something to distract the air defense systems, although they don't need that. Following the 1st of October, clearly they don't need that. No THAAD will help them, no nothing that belongs to US and its proxies and the genocide state would help them, because most of the missiles landed. And we saw that the Iranian air defense systems are way more effective than the Israeli air defense systems. And again, no support from the US is going to help them. Now, with regards to the numbers of the casualties and losses of the IDF troops, I mean, I spoke about this before, and again, these are my estimates. So I can't come and prove to you that these are the numbers, but I can tell you how I establish these numbers. We had reports coming from Israeli hospitals over 11 months ago, that's 2 months in, talking about tens of thousands of wounded. At the height of the beginning, it was massive attempts of invasion, massive acts of resistance. That was in the beginning. We heard other reports coming from Israel that talk about a number of 100,000 wounded. And mind you, sometimes in Israel, when they say lightly wounded, that means they're amputated. If we take the average, let's say in the first 3 months, the reports of Israeli hospitals that the government wasn't very happy about, that we had, let's say, over 10,000, right? 10, 15, or 20,000 wounded, times that by 4, okay? There were reports of 20, reports of 10. Let's take the middle, okay? There's at least 60,000 wounded, at least a minimum of 60,000 wounded. That's, if not way more than that. And based on footage that we get from the Palestinian resistance, the type of vehicles that they attack, how many soldiers are in those vehicles, we can also establish more numbers. The fact that the Palestinian resistance targeted over 1,300 Israeli vehicles, some of them were completely destroyed, some of them were just targeted, some of them were burning for days without anyone attending them. So can you imagine how there's mass neglect from the state of Israel of its actual troops? They use them as cannon fodder, nothing but. So let's say 60,000, and this is the number that I spoke about before, although that was months back, and it's likely to be higher than that. The average number of killed per wounded in a traditional urban warfare is 1 per 3. So if you have 3 wounded, 1 is dead, okay? Or 1 per 3 dead. So either 20,000 for the 60,000 or 15,000 for the 60,000 wounded. Now that's traditional urban warfare. What we have in Gaza is not a traditional urban warfare, it's destruction warfare. So if the Israeli army, if the genocide army is trained on fighting in urban situations, they would be trained to fight in intact buildings, right, that resemble Palestinian society or Palestinian refugee camps or. None of them would have been trained to fight in combat zones. And I'm surprised that no one in Israel used that argument. I am not fit for purpose. I haven't been trained for this type of war. You never taught me how to fight in destroyed zones, destruction. Who trained in destruction zone? No one in Israel. So how are you sending me to? Okay. And the fact that most of them are reservists, and these reservists are not fit, they're not healthy, they're coming from cushy office works and whatever, and expecting them to go and fight against fierce Palestinian resistance fighters who are protecting their homeland. So, at least, in my opinion, 15 to 20,000 killed. Again, those numbers, you might never hear them in your life because of the level of censorship. But from the reports that I've given you, from the numbers, I estimate that that's the number or something close to it. And also based on the fact that Israel, in many cases, constantly speaks about the need to have more people to fight, something that indicates that they lost a lot of fighters. And they indicated how much they need in certain points. Like before they invaded Rafah, the IDF chief said, we urgently need 7,000 troops. And what they did with their own soldiers, forcing them to fight when they're wounded, forcing them to fight when they're suffering from PTSD, to a level where it led many of them to commit suicide. All of these things indicate that there is massive shortage, that there are many casualties. And when we talk about the number of deaths, in my opinion, and based on my observation for the past year, I think we're talking about five figure numbers, excuse me. And I hope that clarifies. Emre Demirkaya loves Erdogan clinch with Putin about Crimea. Erdogan wants Russia to give it back. Besides being a great speechwriter, is it a clear sign that we can't expect anything from Turkey? Sellout? Listen, I mean, from the beginning of the war, there were many people talking about, Russia, Turkey and Egypt participating. And from the beginning, I personally said that neither Turkey nor Egypt will participate in this war unless there is something being conducted against them that endangers the establishment or the people in power. And that has been the case. The only difference between Egypt and Turkey is that with Turkey and their officials, we had more militant statements coming out and even threats of armed action against Israel, whereas from Egypt, we didn't have that. And I don't think that Turkey will be interfering, again, unless Erdogan is under threat, and then again, potentially. And also, with regards to his position when it comes to Russia, look, they've had increased coordination with Russia and their relations improved with Russia. They also took down a Russian fighter jet in 2016. Don't forget that Erdogan had to apologize for. But they don't see eye to eye on all subjects when it comes to Russia nor Iran. And again, they're not always on the right side, if that makes sense. But with regards to participation, I don't expect that. I think when it comes to participation, we already saw who participates. We saw Hezbollah on the next day participating. We saw Ansarullah in Yemen participating almost immediately, and we saw the Iraqi resistance almost immediately participating. All of them are supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran, who later also participated. These are the people who participated directly. Of course, when we talk about the cases of Lebanon, of Iraq, the resistance movements, also not just Hezbollah and one or two movements. You're talking about a term that is used to describe many movements in Iraq when we talk about the Islamic resistance in Iraq. And of course, Ansarullah in Yemen, they're the main ones. But Iran also, I think, so if anyone wanted to flex muscles or show something, they would have shown it by now. And what? Now we're over a year in this, over 43,000 verified, only verified, for purposes of integrity, professional integrity, when it comes to the health ministry of Gaza. Verified deaths, over half of which, as a matter of fact, 2/3 women and children, over 17,000 of which children, infanticide. thousands of under ones in Gaza, infanticide, genocide. Is that an excuse to participate? For the sake of your power, you remaining in power, or in fear of what? US retaliation? What is it? The ones who wanted to show their true positions already showed their true and noble and honorable positions. Those who are talking continue to talk, and we haven't seen anything but talk from them. I don't expect that to change. Jimmy, Mahmoud, did Hezbollah claim they hit a vehicle injuring 2 high-rank IDF goons? They showed a rolled-over vehicle. They target high-ranking genocide forces every single day in Lebanon. And that's why Israel had to recalculate many things when it comes to Lebanon, because they had this bloodbath against their army, against their genocide army in Gaza, and they offered an even worse bloodbath in the north. And again, they will try and do anything to cover that up. Limited successes, targeting individuals, targeting the Secretary General. Tell me what you are doing to prevent the attacks that are happening against you. Tell me, in the case of Israel and Netanyahu, what you are doing to achieve your objectives of the war, right? You have objectives of the war. Tell me what you have done to successfully achieve your objectives of the war. In the form of Gaza, eliminating Hamas, getting the prisoners back, making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat again. 0, 0, 0. In the north, there's one objective, returning the people safely back to the north. Are you closer to that? No. Then they said, but unofficially, we want to eliminate, as in an unofficial objective, because they haven't put it as an official objective, we want to eliminate Hezbollah. Dude, you will be wiping out your state before you eliminate Hezbollah. What are you talking about? All of it is for public consumption. And again, all that Netanyahu is doing is increasing the risk on Israel as a state. If there are 20 self-destruction buttons in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu is pressing on all of them. And we see every day, we see more and more actions coming from Hezbollah. Furious George Mahmoud, what events could unite Sunni and Shia in the region and at what cost? Well, firstly, from my perspective, I view the Sunni Shia division, well, based on historical facts, to be a political division rather than a religious division that started to take religious shape afterwards. It was mainly over who rules the Islamic world and should they be relatives of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or not. Then we started to have a more religious shape coming to it. In Islam as a religion, you are prevented from dividing into sects. And there are many verses in the Quran that ban you from dividing into sects and warn you from doing that and telling you have nothing to do with Islam if you do that. Now, of course, we have a reality. We have a reality where there are certain divisions. When it comes to event that could unite them, I think what we're seeing now is a massive case that not only unites certain sects in Islam, although I pray for the day where any term following Islam would cease to exist and we all only follow Islam as a religion, as we should, and submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. And also united humanity. It's not only uniting many people in the Muslim world. You're seeing people from everywhere united for the cause of human rights, equality, so many things that we agree on. Because if you speak about it from a fundamental perspective, what are the religious teachings? What are the things and values that bring us together, right? Of course, when you talk about certain theological aspects of religion, there are certain things that are unique, but there are things that are close with general values. But people are looking at a case of massive suffering, massive injustice, and a call for justice and liberty liberty, and freedom. A big fight against injustice. That's something that should resonate with any individual on earth. And that's why you are seeing a massive global movement that is opposing war, that is opposing crimes against humanity, that is opposing genocide, and supporting justice and liberty and sovereignty and freedom. That's what it's about. And also, don't get fooled by the term pro-Palestinian, by the way. What's pro-Palestinian? I'm Palestinian myself, I'll tell you that. I talk about this case. Of course, I happen to be Palestinian, so I have to talk about it, right? There's so many lies. But it's a massive case of injustice. Any person in the world suffering this, I would go and stand up with them, right? Stand for them and speak about them, right? So it's beyond a nationality, and it's beyond also religious differences. And I think it's doing its part and opening eyes internally within the Muslim world about the reality or realities that are facing the Muslim world, and opening the eyes of the global population, and mainly Western populations, because they were the most misled when it comes to the region and when it comes to Israel. They have been misled to a very large extent, and a large chunk of that is due to constant propaganda, pseudo-narratives, uses of forms of terror, psychological terror, to instill fear in the people from criticizing this entity, because they covered it up with so many terms and started to come up with these excuses not to criticize the entity. And they use certain methods to intimidate people, or try to intimidate people to stop talking about this criminal apartheid supremacist entity. And they are the ones who are mostly seeing the situation. Now, of course, when it comes to the Arab and Muslim world, it's sparking more of a debate of, well, hold on a second, what is the division based upon, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, it's I think this cause is uniting humanity for humanitarian purposes. And I think the Palestinian resistance, the Lebanese resistance, and the resistance movements in the region, in Yemen, Iraq, and I think Iran, are leading a global fight for humanity. And they are proving time after time to be the true champions of human rights by words and by actions, not just by words or by whitewashing or by propaganda, but genuinely. And that is becoming more evident to the world now, especially the parts that were misled for a very long time. And I hope that elaborates, my friend. Let's take one or two more questions, and then we will wrap up. And thank you again, everyone, for your participation. And again, Arash and Studio Rainer, thank you for your contribution. Studio Rainer, you're saying that how will the West react to Orthodox and Muslims fighting together and beating Ukraine? Breaks the whole narrative they have for divisions. Well, listen, I think the narrative is broken for divisions anyway. Why? Because in the form of Ukraine, well, you have Orthodox and Muslims fighting for Ukraine or for Zelensky, and you have Muslims and Orthodox fighting on the other side. That's why I think, people shouldn't fall into the talk of division and the fact that it's this versus that, or it's that religion that's the problem, and the followers of that religion are that problem. And in the case, look, we talk about the case of Israel, right? What are they? call themselves a Jewish state, right? Aren't they majority Jewish? They are, of course. But again, that's not a reason to go and say, no, we have a problem with Judaism or the Jewish people. No, that's not the correct approach, neither here nor anywhere else. Why? Because that would be distorting reality. How would it be distorting reality? It would use a certain situation where you have many contributors for a theory or for an argument and use it as a whole. And what have we created then? Well, we instilled more division. We fell into the same trap that they are using, this complete totalitarian, everyone from that side is to blame. No, and because so that argument really is weak, is exceptionally weak. And like I said, when it comes to Ukraine, it's evident. You have Muslims fighting for Ukraine, you have Muslims fighting for Russia. You have Orthodox fighting for Ukraine, Orthodox fighting for Russia. And in other parts as well, they want to portray it that way to keep the division going. So be careful about that. Be careful about anything that instills division rather than bring people together, because someone would be benefiting. And our duty, I believe, is to find something that we can commonly agree on and respect the fact that we would still have certain things that we don't agree with. And again, thank you so much for that. That was from Studio Rainer, and thank you everyone else who sent supers. Mark Calvi as well, thank you very much. And okay, one last one before we wrap up. "1984 Sarajevo," thank you for that. And who will stop them? I think the people who will stop Israel are the people who are currently fighting Israel. So we have the Palestinian resistance, first and foremost, by the resilience of the faithful Palestinian people standing up and not willing to back down. And then, of course, by the brave Lebanese people and Lebanese resistance. And then, of course, Yemen and Iraq, and of course, Iran. These are the people who will be stopping this genocide entity, because they have been the ones fighting so far, and they prove time after time that they are leading the cause to protect human rights in the region against mass terror supported by the United States administration and its proxies and its final last little mini tiny expansionist, apartheid, genocidal, neo-colonialist, supremacist entity that will be ending very soon. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Thanks for everyone who participated. And of course, apologies if we missed some of the comments. Thanks for everyone who sent supers. Much appreciated. 1984 Sarajevo. Ryan 78. Tristan Graf G. Mark Calvi, Studio Rainer, Arash Aram, Faint Signals, and Arash again, thank you so much. Shiva Mohan, Golden Sun, Alan Marwin, Jonathan Ray, Stephen Burrows, Ryan 78 again, Sailor, Jerry Swallow, and Sean Hurl. Thank you so much for all of your participation and contribution. I also saw just one last thing from Tristan. Said, how can the world move forward considering the genocide state's fanatic policies backed by the US? There will be an end. Israel will fall then. We are seeing that. I'm telling you, we are seeing that end taking place because we are seeing the emergence of a multipolar world and the collapse of the US empire. The US empire is collapsing. The Zio genocide state will collapse with it. We will hopefully look towards building something that is equal for everyone, especially in Palestine, but also the peoples globally will be enjoying better rights without this mass terror state and administration wreaking havoc across the world, as we have seen in the past decades. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll hopefully be with you with another video after this, and we'll hopefully have another live stream tomorrow. In the meantime, stay blessed. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.